Have you ever felt a stare so heavy it could pin you to the floor? A laugh so sharp it could cut you? For Amara Sterling, a brilliant 22-year-old architecture student, that feeling became a public spectacle in the bustling chaos of JFK's international terminal. She stood there, holding a legitimate, fully paid-for first-class ticket on Airlines flight 710 to London. But the gate agent, a woman named Brenda, saw something different. She didn't see a passenger. She saw a target. What followed was an act of audacious prejudice, a humiliating confrontation in front of hundreds. Little did Brenda know her cruel laughter was echoing all the way to the top. She was about to learn that the young woman she was mocking held the fate of the entire airline in her hands, because her father wasn't just another CEO. He was the new CEO, who had just bought it. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport was its usual symphony of controlled chaos. The rhythmic roll of suitcases, the cacophony of a dozen languages, the tinny announcements of final boarding calls. It was a river of humanity flowing towards 1,000 different destinations. Amara Sterling was a calm island in that river. Dressed in a stylish yet comfortable set of dark grey cashmere joggers and a matching hoodie from a high-end athleisure brand with pristine white Alexander McQueen sneakers on her feet. She was the epitome of modern travel chic. Her braided hair was pulled back into a neat, elegant bun, and on her back was a sleek, minimalist leather backpack, carrying her laptop sketchbook and the notes for the Global Architecture Symposium in London she was about to attend. She felt a pleasant thrum of anticipation. This trip was a milestone. It was the first time she was attending a major international conference, not as a student tag-along, but as a delegate whose university research on sustainable urban materials had earned her a coveted spot. The first-class ticket had been a surprise gift from her father. "Go on, sweetheart," his voice had boomed over the phone. "You've earned it. Stretch out, get some rest, and knock 'em dead in London." Her father, Marcus Sterling, was a man whose presence filled any room he entered. He was a titan of industry, a self-made man who had built a private equity empire from the ground up. His latest acquisition, a struggling transatlantic carrier named Airlines, had been all over the financial news. He saw potential where others saw failure, a diamond in the rough he was determined to polish. Amara was immensely proud of him, but she had always forged her own path, valuing her academic achievements far more than her father's net worth. She arrived at Gate B24, the designated departure point for Airlines Flight 710. The boarding process hadn't officially begun, but a small crowd was already forming. Behind the counter stood two agents. One was a young man idly tapping at a keyboard. The other a woman in her late 40s with tired eyes and a name tag that read Brenda was scanning the gathering passengers with a look of profound boredom that bordered on disdain. Amara took a seat a short distance away, pulling out a book on structural engineering. She was engrossed in a chapter on tensile structures when the announcement for pre-boarding crackled over the PA system. "We now invite our first-class passengers, as well as families with young children, to begin boarding." Closing her book, Amara stood up and joined the short line that was forming. When her turn came, she approached the counter and handed her passport and boarding pass to Brenda. Brenda took them without making eye contact, her fingers expertly flicking the documents open. Her eyes scanned the boarding pass first. First class, seat 2A. Then she looked at the passport. Amara Sterling. Then her eyes finally lifted slowly, deliberately, and settled on Amara's face. It wasn't a glance. It was an assessment. a cold, dismissive appraisal that traveled from Amara's sneakers up to her braided hair. A tiny, almost imperceptible sneer tugged at the corner of her lips. "There must be a mistake," Brenda said, her voice flat. Amara blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry." "This is for first class, pre-boarding," Brenda stated, as if speaking to a child. She tapped a lacquered nail on the boarding pass. "Yes, I know," Amara replied politely, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. "My seat is 2A. Brenda let out a short, sharp huff of air. It wasn't quite a laugh, but it was close. It was a sound of derisive disbelief. She looked over at her younger colleague, who was now watching with mild interest. "Funny," Brenda said loud enough for the people in line behind Amara to hear. "The system must be on the fritz today." Humiliation, hot and sharp, pricked at Amara's cheeks. She could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her. A portly man in a rumpled suit behind her shifted his weight impatiently. "There's no mistake," Amara said, her voice quiet but firm. She refused to let this woman rattle her. "The ticket was booked 2 weeks ago. If you scan it, you'll see it's valid." Brenda picked up the boarding pass as if it were a soiled tissue. She scanned it, and the machine beeped green. A flicker of something annoyance, disappointment crossed her face before being replaced by a mask of officious suspicion. The name Brenda said, her voice hardening. "Amara Sterling. Is that you?" "Yes, that's me," Amara said, gesturing to the open passport in Brenda's hand. The photo and name match. Brenda stared at the passport photo, then back at Amara's face, her eyes narrowing. "This is a very expensive ticket. Sometimes people use found or stolen credit cards to purchase them online. The airline then has to cancel the ticket at the gate. It causes a lot of problems." The accusation was no longer veiled. It was hanging in the air, thick and ugly. The line behind Amara was growing, the murmurs starting to ripple. She was being accused publicly of fraud. It was not purchased with a stolen card. Amara said, her patience wearing dangerously thin. "It was a gift from my father." This, for some reason, struck Brenda as hilarious. This time she did laugh. It was a short, barking sound that made Amara flinch. "Right. Your father," Brenda said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She leaned forward, lowering her voice into a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "Listen, honey. I don't know what game you're playing, but the high roller act isn't working. People who belong in first class, they don't look like you." The words hit Amara like a physical blow. "They don't look like you." The casual racism, the smug superiority, it was breathtaking. All the air seemed to leave her lungs. For a moment, she was just a 22-year-old woman being bullied, her excitement for her trip curdling into a bitter mix of shame and anger. But then the shame receded, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. The resolve of Marcus Sterling's daughter. She had been taught to never ever let anyone diminish her. And what exactly, Amara asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Do people who belong in first class look like Brenda?" was taken aback by the direct challenge. She stammered for a second. "Well, they're more put together." She gestured vaguely at Amara's athleisure wear. "You mean they're not black?" Amara asked, her voice clear and carrying. The murmuring in the line stopped. The man in the rumpled suit suddenly seemed very interested in his shoes. Brenda's face flushed a blotchy red. I did not say that, she snapped. "This is about airline security policy. I'm not satisfied. I need to see a secondary form of photo ID, and the credit card used to make the purchase. I don't have the credit card. It was a gift, Amara repeated, her teeth clenched. And my passport is a federally issued, internationally recognized form of identification. It is the highest form of ID you can ask for. You know that. It's my discretion. Brenda shot back her authority, now her only shield. And at my discretion, you are not boarding this flight until you can satisfy my security concerns. Now either you step aside and let me board the actual passengers, or I'll have to call airport security. Amara looked at the sneer on Brenda's face, at the nervous glances from the other passengers, and at the other gate agent who was now pretending to be completely absorbed in his work. She was being stonewalled, humiliated, and racially profiled. Then I suggest, Amara said, pulling her phone from her pocket, you call your supervisor. Because you and I are going to have a very long conversation about Airlines' customer service policies. Brenda's eyes glittered with malice. Oh, I'll call him, and he'll tell you the exact same thing. She picked up the gate phone with a triumphant smirk. David Brenda at B24. I've got a situation here. A passenger with a questionable first-class ticket. Yes. Refusing to cooperate. Amara didn't flinch. She simply unlocked her phone, her thumb hovering over a single name in her contacts. Isabel Rossi, her father's chief operating officer, the woman who ran the entire Sterling empire day to day. She hadn't wanted to do this. She hadn't wanted to pull the CEO's daughter card. But Brenda hadn't left her any other choice. She was no longer just a passenger. She was an owner, and her property was rotting from the inside out. She pressed the call button just as a harried-looking man in a slightly too tight suit rushed towards the gate. The supervisor had arrived. The stage was set. The drama was about to escalate. The man who bustled towards gate B24 was the physical embodiment of middle management stress. His name tag, pinned slightly askew on the lapel of a charcoal suit that was a little too tight at the shoulders, read David Chen. He was the duty manager, and his face wore the perpetually harried expression of someone who viewed every problem not as an opportunity for resolution, but as a personal affront to his already chaotic schedule. He had been in his small, windowless office attempting to reconcile fuel load discrepancies when Brenda's call had come through, and he had marched over with the weary resignation of a man summoned to deal with yet another hysterical passenger. "What's the problem here, Brenda?" he asked, his voice clipped and impatient. His eyes briefly scanned Amara, taking in her designer athleisure wear, not as a sign of affluence, but as the uniform of a generation he fundamentally misunderstood and distrusted. In his mind, she was already categorized, entitled, probably looking for a handout or trying to pull a fast one. This passenger. Brenda began infusing the word with a theatrical level of disdain that she knew David would appreciate. It was their unspoken code. She is holding a first-class ticket, but her story is all over the place. Refuses to provide standard verification. Claims it was a gift from her father. She said the words in air quotes, and naturally she can't produce the purchasing credit card. Her ID just doesn't feel right to me. I informed her that for security reasons, I wasn't comfortable boarding her, and she immediately became hostile and belligerent. It was a masterful piece of fiction painting Amara as the aggressor. David Chen, preconditioned by years of similar complaints and his own inherent biases, accepted it without question. He saw Brenda, a 12-year veteran of the airline, as a known quantity. He saw Amara as an unknown variable, and therefore the problem. He turned to Amara, adopting a tone of forced, patronizing calm. Ma'am, he began, as if addressing a toddler on the verge of a tantrum. I'm David Chen, the duty manager for this terminal. I understand there's some confusion with your ticket. Now, boarding is already 10 minutes behind schedule, so if you could just step over here with me. He gestured to an empty stretch of wall away from the podium. We can sort this out quietly without holding up everyone else. His intent was clear: to isolate her, to remove her from the public stage where she had an audience. Amara, however, did not move. Her phone was already at her ear, the call she had placed just seconds before David's arrival now connecting. She held up a single elegant finger, a universal sign for one moment, which to David's frayed nerves felt like an act of supreme insolence. Isabel. It's Amara Sterling. I'm fine, thank you for asking. I apologize for calling you directly on your mobile. Amara's voice was a study in professional composure, a stark contrast to the scene around her. I have a situation at JFK Terminal 4 Gate B24. Yes, Airlines. We seem to be having a significant customer service failure, escalating to a level 2 incident. No, I'm not in any danger, but I am being publicly accused of credit card fraud and denied boarding on Flight 710. The gate agent's name is Brenda Jenkins, and her supervisor, a Mr. V. Chen, has just arrived and is supporting her position. David and Brenda exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated disbelief. This was a new tactic, a call to a mysterious Isabel, who was supposedly important enough to warrant this drama. Brenda let out a barely suppressed snort of derision. It was a bluff, and a pathetic one at that. Ma'am, I am going to have to insist that you end your phone call. Now, David said, his voice rising in volume and authority. You are actively delaying the departure of an international flight. This is your final warning before I involve Port Authority police. It was at that precise moment that a new voice cut through the tension. A calm and resonant baritone that commanded attention. Robert Harrison, the distinguished gentleman in the Brioni suit, had seen and heard enough. He stepped out of the line, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to David's agitated state. Excuse me, Mr. Chen. Mr. Harrison said, his eyes locking with the manager's. My name is Robert Harrison. My seat is 3A. I am a premier executive member of your airline's loyalty program, and I have flown over 2 million miles with this carrier and its partners, and I feel it is my civic duty to inform you that your employee Brenda is not just misrepresenting the situation. She is lying. Brenda's head whipped around her face, a mask of outrage. Sir, this is a private internal airline matter. It became a public matter the moment you chose to humiliate this young lady in front of 200 people. Mr. Harrison retorted, his voice unwavering. He turned his steely gaze back to David. Mr. Chen. I was standing directly behind Miss Sterling. She was nothing but polite and patient. Your agent, on the other hand, was hostile from the very first second. She sneered at her ticket loudly and repeatedly implied it was purchased fraudulently, and then made the utterly disgusting and slanderous comment that people who look like her do not belong in first class. Her behavior was not a security check. It was a vulgar power trip, fueled by prejudice. David Chen was momentarily stunned into silence. A witness of this caliber, articulate and clearly influential, was a complication he hadn't anticipated. His managerial mind raced. Still, the simplest path was to back his employee and isolate the problem. Sir. With all due respect, David said, trying to regain control, you are not privy to the security indicators our agents are trained to look for. I trust my veteran employee's judgment. Her judgment. Mr. Harrison countered with a dry, mirthless chuckle. Sir, her judgment is a corporate liability. I have seen better judgment from school children in a playground. And I assure you, a detailed, formal complaint outlining every word I have just said will be on the desk of your corporate superiors by the time this flight lands in London, regardless of what you do next. The threat hung in the air, potent and real. While this heated exchange was unfolding, Amara had concluded her call. She lowered her phone and met David Chen's flustered gaze. Her own eyes were now devoid of any warmth. They were chips of obsidian. Isabel Rossi will be calling the gate's direct line within the next 2 minutes. Amara stated, her voice as crisp and cold as a winter morning. She is the Chief Operating Officer of the Sterling Equity Group. Perhaps you've heard of them. They are the private equity firm that finalized the acquisition of Airlines 23 days ago. I imagine she will want to have a detailed conversation with you about your department's training protocols for identifying people who belong in first class. The name Sterling Equity Group detonated in the tense air. David knew the name. Every employee knew the name. It was the new empire, the faceless entity that had saved them from bankruptcy, but that everyone feared. But the connection, the sheer audacity of this young woman's claim seemed impossible. He processed it not as a fact, but as a desperate, elaborate gambit. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "The COO, honey, that's quite a story," he said, the condescending term slipping out. Brenda, emboldened by his reaction, joined in with a triumphant smirk. "The COO of Sterling Equity." "Sure thing. And I suppose your father is Marcus Sterling himself," she jeered, the sarcasm dripping from her words. She believed she had just delivered the checkmate to Amara's ridiculous fantasy. The irony of her statement was so thick it was almost comical. Amara didn't reply. She simply held their gaze, a silent promise in her eyes. And then it happened. It wasn't the soft chime of the internal intercom. It was a shrill, piercing, insistent ring from the external direct line telephone on the podium, the one reserved for urgent outside calls. The young male agent, who had been trying to make himself invisible throughout the ordeal, flinched at the sound. His eyes darted to the small digital caller ID screen. His face, already pale, turned the color of chalk. His jaw went slack. He looked from the screen to David Chen, his eyes wide with a terror that was primal. "David," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. It's a call from New York corporate headquarters." He swallowed, his voice cracking. "The caller ID, it says Office of the Chief Operating Officer." The world seemed to slow down for David Chen. The ambient noise of the terminal faded into a dull roar. He looked at the phone ringing like a death knell. He looked at the horrified face of his junior agent. He looked at the mocking, triumphant sneer that was now melting from Brenda's face, being replaced by a creeping confusion. Finally, he looked at Amara, at her calm, unblinking, victorious eyes. "Sterling Equity Group. The CEO, Amara, Sterling. My father." The pieces of the puzzle didn't just click into place. They slammed together with the force of a physical impact, knocking the very breath from his lungs. It wasn't a bluff. It wasn't a threat. It was the simple, unvarnished, cataclysmic truth. Brenda's sarcastic taunt had been the literal reality. With a hand that trembled visibly, David reached for the shrieking telephone. His bravado, his authority, his entire sense of self-importance evaporated, leaving behind only the cold, stark terror of a man who knows he has just flown his career directly into the side of a mountain. He lifted the receiver. D. David Chen speaking. He listened. The color drained from his face as if a plug had been pulled. His posture, once puffed with managerial pride, visibly deflated. His shoulders slumped, and he hunched over the counter as if seeking shelter from the verbal storm erupting in his ear. Yes. Yes, ma'am. This is the duty manager for Terminal 4. A long, excruciating pause followed. David's free hand came up to clutch his forehead. I'm not sure I follow. Amara Sterling. He spoke the name aloud, a choked, agonizing whisper of dawning comprehension. He looked over at Amara, and for the first time, he truly saw her. Not as a problem passenger, but as the daughter of the man who owned his entire world. Oh, he breathed out. Oh, God. His knuckles wrapped around the receiver were bone white. Yes, ma'am. I understand. Completely. No, ma'am. There is no excuse for what happened. None whatsoever. Yes, she is right here. I will rectify this immediately. My profound apologies, ma'am. He hung up the phone with the deliberate, careful motion of someone handling an unexploded bomb. He stood frozen for a second, his mind a whirlwind of panic. Then he turned to Amara. He couldn't meet her gaze. He stared at a point on her collarbone, his own face a mask of pathetic, groveling desperation. Miss Sterling. He stammered the name, tasting like ash and terror on his tongue. My deepest, most sincere and humble apologies. There has been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. Brenda stared at him, her mind unable to process the 180-degree turn. David, what is going on? She demanded, a note of hysteria in her voice. Who is she? David finally looked at Brenda, and the look in his eyes was one of pure, unadulterated fear. It was the look of a man staring into the abyss of his own professional ruin and realizing he was about to drag her down with him. Brenda, he said, his voice ragged and broken. Her father is Marcus Sterling. The name landed in the silent gate area with the force of a physical explosion. Marcus Sterling, the Titan, the Savior, the new king, the man who had just bought the airline. Brenda's world didn't just tilt, it shattered into a million pieces. The face of the young woman she had mocked, derided and racially profiled, now morphed in her mind's eye into the face of the billionaire who held her livelihood in the palm of his hand. The sneer, the laugh, the condescension, it all came rushing back to her, a tidal wave of regret so powerful it made her physically nauseous. She gripped the counter to keep from collapsing. Please, Miss Sterling. David begged, his voice now a slick, sycophantic whine. Allow me to personally escort you onto the aircraft. We will get you settled. Anything you need. Can I take your backpack for you? Amara held up a hand, a gesture that was both simple and absolute. No, she said, her voice now resonating with an authority she hadn't possessed 10 minutes ago. You won't be escorting me anywhere. And this misunderstanding, as you call it, is not over. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. It's just beginning. The silence that followed David Chen's choked pronouncement of the name, Marcus Sterling, was a living entity. It was thick, heavy, and suffocating. At Gate B24, the river of humanity had stopped flowing, dammed by the sheer calamitous gravity of the moment. The murmuring crowd was now a captivated audience, at a public execution, their phones held aloft, discreetly recording the corporate car crash unfolding before them. David Chen, having hung up the phone, now began a frantic, pathetic ballet of appeasement. "Miss Sterling," he pleaded, his voice a desperate, oily slick. "Please, 1,000 apologies are not enough. This is the worst mistake of my professional career. Allow me to fix this. We can have you pre-boarded now alone before anyone else. I'll have the flight attendants bring you a bottle of Dom Perignon as soon as you're seated. It will be on my personal account, of course. Your bag. Please let me take your bag for you." He made a move toward her minimalist leather backpack, his hands outstretched as if reaching for a holy relic that could grant him absolution. Amara took a sharp step back, her body language a clear, cold wall of rejection. "Do not touch my things," she said, her voice low and steady, yet carrying an authority that cut through his babbling. Brenda, meanwhile, was cycling through the stages of a terminal diagnosis. Her initial shock gave way to a frantic, sputtering denial. "David, what are you talking about?" It can't be," she whispered, looking from her terrified manager to Amara's implacable face. "She's lying. It's a trick. It's not a trick, Brenda." David hissed, his eyes wild with panic. The call was from the COO's office. "Do you understand what you've done?" The reality finally pierced Brenda's shield of denial, and she crumpled. But it wasn't the dignified crumple of remorse. It was the desperate implosion of a cornered animal. She turned to Amara, her entire demeanor shifting into a grotesque caricature of friendliness. Her face, moments ago contorted with spite, was now arranged in a sickeningly sweet mask of regret. "Oh, Miss Sterling, I am so terribly sorry," she gushed, her voice cloying. "You have to understand, I've had such a stressful day. The computer systems have been lagging, we're understaffed, and I'm on the back end of a double shift." I wasn't myself. It wasn't personal, I swear. When I looked at you, my training just kicked in. It was a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake. Please, you're so young and beautiful, you have a kind heart. I can see it. Please don't let my one mistake ruin my life. I have a family." Amara looked at the woman, at the torrent of manufactured excuses and crocodile tears, and felt nothing but a profound, cold disgust. She didn't have to say a word. Her silence was its own verdict. Just as Brenda was about to launch into another wave of pleas, a change occurred in the atmosphere of the terminal. It began at the edges of the crowd, a subtle shift, a parting of the seas. A ripple of awareness of authority washed through the gate area. Airport staff members, who had been watching from a distance, suddenly found reasons to look busy, their postures straightening. The crowd of passengers turned as one, their gazes drawn toward the main concourse. Striding towards them was a figure of undeniable power. Flanked by two grim-faced Port Authority officials, Amara Sterling moved not like a man walking through an airport, but like a general reviewing his troops on a battlefield. He was dressed in a bespoke navy suit that fit his powerful frame perfectly. There was no rage on his face, no histrionics. There was something far more terrifying, a cold, focused fury that radiated from him in waves. He had taken Isabel's call in his car on the Van Wyck Expressway, a vein throbbing in his temple as she relayed the details. His driver had performed a U-turn that defied both traffic laws and physics. He came to a stop not in front of the gate agents, but directly beside his daughter. The entire world of Gate B24 seemed to shrink, a spotlight illuminating the four central players in the drama. Marcus ignored David and Brenda, completely placing a firm, steadying hand on Amara's shoulder. His sharp, intelligent eyes searched hers. "Amara, are you all right?" His voice was a low rumble, meant for her alone, yet it seemed to vibrate through the floor. He wasn't just asking if she was physically unharmed. He was asking if her spirit was intact after the public assault on her dignity. "I'm fine, Dad." She managed her voice stronger than she expected. The sheer solid presence of him was an anchor in the turbulent sea of her emotions. "I'm just incandescently angry." A flicker of a pained smile touched his lips. "I know the feeling," he murmured. "Stay angry. It's a clean emotion." That was the entirety of their private exchange. Then the father receded, and the CEO emerged. He straightened to his full imposing height and turned his glacial gaze upon David Chen. "You," he began, the single word cracking like a whip in the silent air. "You are the duty manager." David Chen. David, who had frozen mid-grovel, looked as though he might faint. He nodded, unable to form words, his Adam's apple bobbing spastically in his throat. "I have a question about your management philosophy." "Mr. Chen." Marcus continued, his voice deceptively calm, like the quiet before a lightning strike. "When a situation like this arises, a confrontation between an employee and a customer, what does the Airlines procedure manual, a manual I now own, instruct you to do? Does it instruct you to immediately and blindly take the side of your employee? Does it instruct you to enable public humiliation? Or does it perhaps instruct you to listen, to investigate, and to de-escalate with fairness and professionalism? Tell me which chapter I should read to understand your decision-making process." David stammered, his mind a complete blank. Sir, I apologize. Marcus cut him off with a flick of his wrist, dismissing him as irrelevant. He then turned his full, undivided attention to Brenda, who had frozen in the middle of her performance, her tear-stained face a mask of pure terror. "And you, Brenda Jenkins." The way he said her name made it sound like a disease. "My COO, Miss Rossi, informed me of the details of your customer interaction. She tells me you made a joke. You were having a little fun at my daughter's expense." He took a slow, deliberate step closer, and Brenda involuntarily took a step back. "Your exact words, I believe, were a sarcastic question. Something along the lines of, 'And I suppose your father is Marcus Sterling himself.'" He paused, letting her own words hang in the air and crucify her. "Let me answer that question for you now, Brenda." "Yes, I am. Now help me understand something. Was that a part of your security protocol? Is taunting passengers about their parentage a new key performance indicator for this airline? Because if it is, I assure you it will be eliminated by close of business today." Brenda broke. A raw, guttural sob tore from her throat. It was no longer a performance. It was the sound of a life unraveling in real time. "No, sir. Please, I didn't mean it. It was stupid. I was under so much pressure." Pressure. Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerously low, venomous whisper. He was so close, she could feel the heat of his fury. "You want to talk to me about pressure? This airline, Brenda, is bleeding money. It has a reputation for service so poor that people pay extra to fly on our competitors. I have 8,000 employees whose jobs and pensions are balanced on a knife's edge. I have bankers and creditors who would love nothing more than to see me fail and liquidate this entire company for parts. That is pressure, and in the face of that pressure, my job is to build this company up. Your job is to help me. Instead, you chose to spend your time tearing down a young woman to make yourself feel powerful for 5 minutes. You are not a victim of pressure. You are a source of the poison that has been killing this airline from within. He straightened up, his verdict rendered. He turned to the Port Authority officials, who stood by, stone-faced. Officer, please confiscate Mr. Chen's and Ms. Jenkins's airport credentials and employee identification effective immediately. They are both suspended. I want them escorted from airport property. My COO will conduct a formal investigation, but I can assure you all it is a mere formality. Their employment with Aura Airlines is terminated. The finality of the words was absolute. Brenda let out a weak wail as one of the officers stepped forward and politely but firmly asked for her ID badge. She fumbled with the clip, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't unhook it. The officer gently did it for her. David, looking like a ghost, silently handed over his own credentials, his career of mediocrity and cowardice ending not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a plastic card being taken from his pocket. As the two disgraced employees were led away, a pathetic and defeated pair, Marcus turned to address the silent, watching crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice boomed with authority on behalf of Aura Airlines. I am profoundly sorry for the disgusting behavior you were forced to witness and for the delay this has caused. My name is Amara Sterling. I am the new CEO of this airline. I give you my personal word, this is not the company I intend to run. This culture of disrespect ends today. He caught the eye of Robert Harrison. Mr. Harrison. Thank you, sir. Thank you for speaking up. An airline is only as good as the people who work for it, and the people who fly with it. Your integrity is appreciated. He then turned back to his daughter, the CEO mask dissolving back into the father. Come on, let's get you on your flight. Dad, your flight to Chicago. Amara began, still processing the whirlwind of events. Cancelled, he said without a moment's hesitation. He was already pulling out his phone, dialing Isabel Rossi. Isabel, book me a seat on flight 710 to London. Any seat. I don't care if I have to sit in the galley and cancel my entire Chicago schedule. This is more important. He listened for a moment. I know it's a crisis. That's why I have to be there. This isn't about 2 bad employees, is it? It's a cancer, and I'm the surgeon. The surgery starts now. He ended the call and looked at Amara. I'm coming with you. We're going to fix this. Not with a memo, not with a press release. We're going to rip the rot out with our bare hands. The 7-hour flight across the Atlantic was a bubble of surreal calm, suspended between 2 storms. For Amara, nestled in the quiet luxury of seat 2A sleep, was an impossibility. The confrontation played over and over in her mind, not the humiliation, but the moments of clarity. Mr. Harrison's steady voice, the shift in David Chen's eyes, the unyielding strength in her father's posture. Her initial anger, a white-hot flame, was now cooling into a hard, clear sense of purpose. She wasn't just a victim of a corporate failure. She was now inextricably a catalyst for its rebirth. A few hours into the flight, Marcus made his way up the aisle from his seat in premium economy. He knelt beside her, his large frame filling the space. The cabin lights were dim, and most passengers were asleep. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice a low murmur. "I'm okay," she said, and meant it. I was just thinking about what you said. About the poison. Marcus nodded, his expression grim. A brand is a promise, Amara. Today, 2 of my employees representing my name shattered that promise. They didn't just disrespect you. They told every single person at that gate that the promise of Airlines of safety, of service, of respect is conditional. That it depends on what you look like or what you wear. We don't just patch a hole that big. We have to reforge the entire shield. He looked at her, his eyes full of a fierce pride. You were brilliant back there. You were calm. You were strong. You were everything I ever taught you to be. He squeezed her hand and returned to his seat, where he spent the remainder of the flight hunched over his laptop. He wasn't just answering emails. He was orchestrating a corporate blitzkrieg, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he dictated strategy to Isabel Rossi, who was already mobilizing back in New York. The surgery had begun. The karma that befell Brenda Jenkins and David Chen was not a mystical event. It was a cold, precise, and methodical corporate process, executed with the ruthless efficiency for which Isabel Rossi was famous. Within hours of the incident, her team had constructed a digital fortress around the event. They pulled every frame of security footage. They flagged all internal communications from Brenda and David for the past 5 years. They obtained a sworn, notarized statement from Robert Harrison, who eloquently detailed the entire exchange, his status as a 2-million-mile flyer, giving his testimony immense weight. They also interviewed the junior gate agent who, terrified but honest, confirmed Brenda's long-standing pattern of aggressive behavior and David's habit of handling complaints by making them disappear. The centerpiece of the evidence, however, was the viral video. A passenger had captured the most damning 45 seconds. Brenda's condescending laugh, her sarcastic taunt about Amara Sterling, David's dismissive wave, and the seismic shift in atmosphere upon Marcus's arrival. The video was a global sensation. It was on Twitter, TikTok, and every major news network's website under headlines like "CEO's daughter humiliated by his own airline staff." Brenda Jenkins' termination was delivered via a scheduled video conference 2 days later. She appeared on screen from her living room, her face puffy and stained with tears. Isabel Rossi was on the other end, her expression as impassive as a marble statue. "Ms. Jenkins." Isabel began, her voice devoid of emotion. "We have concluded our investigation into the incident at JFK, Gate B24. We found that you violated Sections 4.1, 7.3, and 11.2 of the Airlines Code of Conduct pertaining to customer respect, anti-discrimination policy, and professional ethics. Furthermore, your actions have resulted in significant reputational damage to this company." Isabel paused. "Do you have anything to say?" "It was a mistake," Brenda sobbed. "Please, I have a mortgage. I gave 12 years to this company." "For 12 years, this company gave you a paycheck and its trust." Isabel countered, her voice like ice. "You betrayed that trust. As of this moment, your employment is terminated." But the true karma was yet to come. Her name, leaked in the comments of an aviation blog, was now permanently attached to the video. She was a meme, a cautionary tale, the face of workplace racism. Weeks later, desperate for work, she applied for a management position at a large hotel chain. A day later, she received a curt, automated rejection email. She tried for a retail job, a call center, anything. Silence. She would Google her name, and the first thing that appeared would be that video, her own ugly laughter echoing back at her from the digital abyss. The 5 seconds of cruel satisfaction she had sought had cost her a lifetime of employability. David Chen's fate was delivered with similar corporate coldness. In his exit interview, he tried to blame the system, the stress anything but his own cowardice. "You were a manager," Mr. Chen Isabel stated flatly. "Your primary function was leadership. When faced with a clear case of employee misconduct, you not only failed to correct it, you actively enabled it. Your negligence allowed a manageable problem to metastasize into a multi-million-dollar brand crisis. There is no longer a place for you at this airline." His professional reputation was obliterated. In the tight-knit aviation community, the story of the manager who let his agent humiliate the new owner's daughter spread like wildfire. He was toxic. His comfortable life, built on a foundation of willful ignorance and moral cowardice, crumbled. Within a year, he was forced to sell his home. The hard karma for him was not just the loss of a job, but the stark public revelation of his character. He wasn't a leader. He was a footnote in a corporate training manual about what not to do. While Isabel handled the executions, Marcus focused on the cure. Upon his return to New York, he convened an emergency meeting of Aura's entire senior leadership in the main boardroom. The executives, most of them holdovers from the previous failing regime, sat in terrified silence. What happened to my daughter at JFK was not an anomaly. Marcus began, his voice filling the cavernous room. It was a symptom of a deep and pervasive corporate disease, a culture of apathy, of bias, of managers who don't manage and employees who don't care. It is a cancer on the brand I have just purchased, and I am here to announce that the chemotherapy starts today. Over the next hour, he laid out his plan, a top-to-bottom cultural demolition and reconstruction. First, he announced a multi-year, multi-million-dollar partnership with the Catalyst Group, a premier diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy. They were given an unrestricted mandate to audit every single department, to write every customer-facing policy, and interview any employee they chose. Second, the old click-through customer service training was officially declared dead. In its place, Marcus commissioned the Sterling Standard, an immersive mandatory training certification for every one of the airline's 8,000 employees. It was developed with psychologists and civil rights experts. The core of the training was a professionally produced documentary about the JFK incident, using it as a case study. It featured an interview with Amara herself. She had agreed on the condition that it was used not to shame, but to teach. In the studio, she spoke with poise and power, not as a victim, but as a leader, explaining how the incident felt and how it could have been avoided at a dozen different points. Her face became the face of the new Aura Airlines, a constant reminder of their promise. Third, he unveiled the Speak Up initiative. It was a new confidential reporting system for ethics and conduct violations managed by an independent third party. Any employee could now report misconduct, including from their direct supervisors, without fear of retaliation. It was a direct response to David Chen's years of burying Brenda's complaints. Accountability would now flow from the bottom up. Finally, at a press conference that made national news, he announced the Amara Sterling Aviation Scholarship, MARA. It was a massive endowment created in partnership with Tuskegee University and other HBCUs, designed to create a pipeline for underrepresented students to enter careers in aviation, management, piloting, and engineering. He was transforming a moment of ugly prejudice into a legacy of opportunity. 6 months later, Amara Sterling was at London's Heathrow Airport, preparing to fly home. She walked towards the Aura Airlines gate and smiled. The branding was updated, the logos sharper, but the real change was at the counter. A young, sharply dressed agent, a black man with a warm smile, looked up as she approached. "Welcome back, Miss Sterling," he said, his eyes bright with recognition. He scanned her passport and boarding pass. "We're honored to have you with us. I hope you had a productive trip." "I did, thank you," Amara replied. As he handed her documents back, he leaned forward slightly. "I just wanted to say, I'm one of the new hires. We all went through the Sterling standard training last month. That video, what you did, it's why a lot of us wanted to work here." "Thank you." Amara was taken aback, a wave of emotion washing over her. She saw in his genuine respect the first fruits of the painful seeds sown that day at JFK. The karma that had toppled 2 careers had not just been about punishment. It had been about clearing the ground so that something better could grow. She smiled a genuine, radiant smile. "Thank you for telling me that. It means the world." Walking down the jet bridge onto the sparkling, clean aircraft, she felt a sense of peace. The airline still bore her name, but now it was beginning to reflect her values. The change was real. It was happening. And it was just beginning. What an incredible story of consequence and transformation. It started with an act of blatant prejudice, a moment of humiliation designed to make a young woman feel small. But Amara Sterling refused to be diminished, and the karma that followed wasn't some magical force. It was the direct, real-world result of one person's actions colliding with a power they could not comprehend. Brenda and David's downfall wasn't just about losing their jobs. It was about the public exposure of the ugliness they harbored, a permanent stain on their reputations that followed them long after. But the most powerful part of this story isn't the punishment. It's the positive change that rose from the ashes of that awful moment. It shows that when people in power witness injustice, they have a choice: look away, or tear the whole rotten system down and build something better. Marcus Sterling chose to build, creating new training, new opportunities, and a new culture of respect. This story is a powerful reminder that our actions, big and small, create ripples. One cruel laugh can lead to ruin, while one brave voice can spark a revolution. If this story resonated with you, and you believe in the power of accountability and positive change, please help our channel grow by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Thank you for listening.